Now, as student protests increase, the ailing National Student Financial Aid Scheme, Nasfas, is facing a financial shortfall of millions of rands, which has a direct impact on the scheme's ability to assist students in the 2021 academic year. And this week, Parliament heard that Nasfas is suffering great financial losses due to the COVID-19 pandemic and also budget cuts. 522 million rand in irregular expenditure and outdated software systems were also some of the issues that were highlighted. Andile Nongogo is the Chief Executive Officer of Nasfas, and he joins us now to talk about some of this. Andile, thanks for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, Andile, what we're seeing at the moment is, of course, student protests that have escalated, resulting in the death of one person, at least yesterday, outside Wits University. But surely this is not new to you, because students have been complaining already since the beginning of the year about their struggles with Nasfas. They talk about not getting responses from the Student Financial Aid Scheme, among other things, and therefore their accounts have been unpaid. They have been unable to register. So let's talk. From your perspective, what is going on?
Thank you, Sakina. Firstly, I should say that condolences to the family of the person that passed away. And also to state, and I'm going to address the issue of why we have not been able to respond. But to do that, we must also try and delineate between why the students are protesting, whilst there may be aspects of NSFAS, as far as we know, because we've engaged with the institution, we have engaged with the students. Many of the issues that students are facing are around historic debt, where students are not being allowed to register, and this would be in the main students that are not NSFAS beneficiaries. This is not to say that there are no NSFAS issues, but I think it's just important that we separate the issues that way. In as far as why NSFAS has not been able to make funding decision, it is not in any way that the scheme was not ready to pronounce on the students that are funded. So the way in which we work, we can only fund on the basis of the budget that we have. Due to I think there's a number of issues that have led to an increased number of applications. Last year, just to bring a comparison, last year we had about 400,000 odd students, 450 odd students applying to NSFAS. This year, which is for 2021, we had over 750,000 students that applied through our online channel. So you can already see the demand has increased. And as such, also in those numbers, there are students in the past that were able to fund themselves or through some other funding, and now they are now having to apply for NSFAS because of change in circumstances. So in other words, the budget shortfall is as a result of more applicants than what was anticipated in the system. And this, in a way, is also a good thing for our country, in that it also shows that a lot more people now are interested in obtaining higher education, and also in the analysis of the applicants, we can see that there are applicants who were working before, who have opted to now go back to school. So the shortfall then, in short, is a result of that. And so until government pronounced on whether or not there would be additional funding, there was no way NSFAS could commit to funding those students.
So, Andile, it's only a good thing if the system actually works, if you are able to pay for those students so that they actually do get to access this education that seems to be elusive at the moment. But as far as those 450,000 students that you talk about from last year, the previous academic year goes, how many of them have not had their debt with the university settled?
Well, Sakina, we need to also provide context in this. Just on the numbers of students that were funded last year, let's take university students alone. we had funded about 490 students. This includes continuing students, odd students. Roughly 90% of those students, their fees were paid and their allowances were paid. Then there's a balance, give or take, about 10,000 odd students where there are exceptions. And these exceptions, yes, we agree, in the main, they are not due to students' fault. You would find that these are students that have been registered on courses that are not NSFAS funded. You would find that the circumstances of those students have since changed. What do I mean by that? When the student applies to us, we look at whether or not the family is within the allowed, or the household has an income of 350 or less. Now, we verify this data through SARS. When we find later that the circumstances have changed, it means that we cannot continue to pay for that student. Some students, yes, we have to admit that some of the issues are admin issues within NSFAS. So all I'm saying is that it is one too many students that are sitting as exceptions. There shouldn't be any exceptions, but also it is not correct to say all the students you are not able to pay for their fees.
Hence, I asked the question, how many students are still waiting on Nasfas to actually pay the institution so that they can register for the new financial year?
As I indicated, there are 10,000 students who we are not able to pay for on the basis that, one, their circumstances have changed. Two, they are enrolled in qualifications that are not funded. Here is the effect of this, Sakina. When you introduced me, you spoke about irregular expenditure that has been incurred by the scheme. If we continue to fund these students while there are these exceptions, we will be further incurring irregular expenditure. Maybe we should also talk about what is irregular expenditure, and in the context of an organization like NSFAS, an organization like a SASA. Sakina, there is this misconception that irregular expenditure means money that has been taken, money that has been used for corrupt activities. By its mere definition, irregular expenditure is expenditure you incur without necessarily following what the legislation says. So here's an example I can give you. One of the items that are listed in our annual report is that there is a requirement that was gazetted by the Department of Higher Education or by the minister then, that when the funding criteria of NSFAS is revised, this needs to be gazetted. It has to be published and it must be gazetted. The funding criteria were published, but they were not gazetted. Therefore, by not gazetting, it effectively means that you have not complied. Now, if you pay those students based on the fact that the criteria, or based on the new criteria, it effectively means by paying for those students, you are now incurring irregular expenditure. And as we know that the Public Audit Act has been revised to say that any person who knowingly incurs irregular expenditure will be held liable either to pay costs personally or will be jailed. And therefore, it makes it very difficult for institutions like ours to continue to pay for those. And let's put it this way. By paying those, does it mean the students are not eligible for funding? The students are eligible for funding. They qualify for funding. Now, the way in which the definition is structured, it doesn't take into account the institutions like ours that are social institutions that provide, if I can say, maybe grant funding. Now, these are some of the issues we are engaging with National Treasury, because these are the issues that make it difficult for us to pay. I mean, even those students who are funded for courses that are not funded by, that are enregistered for courses that are not funded by NSFAS. Is that the student's fault? No. But how then do we continue as NSFAS to fund those students? It's institutions that register students. But it is NSFAS who ultimately incurs irregular expenditure by paying for those students.
So why has NSFAS not reconciled their records against those with the tertiary institutions since 2017?
So, Sakina, maybe I must not take it as for granted that it is well known by now, and this is what we also said when we spoke to Scopa 2 days before, that our systems as NSFAS are aging systems. So also, being aging systems, it means the data integrity of those systems is not so great. Now, part of the problem where there are reconciliation differences, it is differences where in our records, it shows that the student, one scenario, a student shouldn't have been funded or shouldn't have been on the NSFAS list, but the institution show it on their list. It could show that there's a student that was on our list, but is not in the institution's list. Now, the difficulty has been to trace these records. And we should recall, Sakina, that it's only since 2017 that the administration of NSFAS was done in-house. Before, this administration was left to institutions to collect the record and to make the funding decisions. So even the reconciliation stems from the financial year 2017, 2018, and 2019. And as we speak now, there is a team that is dedicated to reconciling these balances with the institutions, so that we've given ourselves up until the end of March to complete this exercise.
To complete which exercise? Because your system has been outdated for a while. Some have even said it's obsolete, and you've just confirmed that. However, you continue to use the same system that is deficient, and therefore you should anticipate that there would be problems.
So, Zakina, you asked me the question of why are we not able to reconcile? I was speaking to the reconciliation process. Of course, if we were to talk about the system, one of the first decisions that we made, myself and the board, when we took office, is to acquire or start a process of acquiring a new system. As we speak with you now, we have completed our user requirements for that system, and we will be going out on tender as required to replace a system. In the interim, we are working on alternative procedures that will make sure that we work outside the system. In as far as disbursements are concerned, we've already communicated with institutions a different disbursement model that will apply while we are busy with the exercise of enhancing our disbursement module in the system.
So how credible is that system? Because it's not going to be of much use if it's just going to compound an already existing problem.
Sakina, hence I say we are looking for alternative ways to work around the system. As you are rightly pointing out, it is pointless to continue to ingest data into a system that we know 99% of the time is going to give errors. What we are talking about is an alternative solution to work around the system. Of course, we can't work manually because we are dealing with millions.
All right, we seem to have lost the sound there, the audio to Andile Nongogo, but, can we come back to that maybe after 8, because there seems to be a bit of a problem there in that connection. But wanted to know exactly what the impact of that shortfall means for first-year students in particular, and of course just looking at some of the other funds that have been spent by Nasfas, about 7 million rand on a forensic investigation, and some other amounts as well, that obsolete system costing 3 million rand per annum. So there's quite a bit of expenditure happening, and at some point we need to get it right. But that was Andile Nongogo, who is the CEO of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, talking to us about some of the current financial issues that the scheme is facing, and of course the dire knock-on effects as we see playing out. Let's take a quick break.